who had a very good sense of humor, right? Madeline and I were standing there, he says, you know, the president's, he doesn't know how he feels about the statue. He said, we don't like it, it's not good enough. He said, we're gonna build another one. I said, well, how's it gonna be different? He said, it'll be 4 feet taller. So Madeline and I started waltzing down the avenue on this gorgeous sunny day, and they still had pictures of Hillary up too, because they thought she was coming. And we were walking down, and she was talking about all the things that she had done to advance freedom and how proud she was of that. And we started talking about Ukraine again, because Putin had told me in 2010 or 2011, I was long out of office, but we were in Davos at the same time, and he asked to see me. And he started talking about Ukraine like it was his backyard. And I said, yeah, you remember? He said, I know what you're going to say. In order to get them to give up their nuclear weapons, you got Boris Yeltsin and John Major and NATO and you, the United States, all to promise to protect their territorial integrity. I know you're going to say that. But I'm not bound by it because Yeltsin couldn't get it through the Duma, and it doesn't have the force of a treaty, and I don't agree with it. And even when Yeltsin was there, the Russians had a huge ultra-nationalist bloc in the Duma that was always pressing in on him. And I knew we were in for a rough ride, so we talked about that a lot. And she really, so we're talking on our last conversation, and I knew that she was weak, even in 2019, but boy, she looked like $1 million. We had a great time that day. And I said, well, so how are you doing? She said, I'm doing fine. I've had medical problems. I've got really good doctors. They're doing the best they can. Let's don't waste any time talking about that. Let's talk about what our grandchildren are going to have to face and how it starts in Ukraine. And so I said, well, our side has to win. The Ukrainians have to win. And we've got to keep everybody together enough for them to get over the line somehow or another. And she told me all these things that she wrote then later in great detail in her wonderful book about fascism and her articles about Ukraine in particular. I'll never forget it. It was an amazing conversation. It was so vintage Madeline. She wasn't even self-consciously brave. She was just a really smart woman that couldn't imagine why you'd waste the last few weeks of your life on reminiscences or regrets when you'd had the life she'd had and there was so much still to do. And she wanted to hit every lick she could, and she did.
You know, it's been said that one of the reasons Putin did what he did and is continuing to do, and I think today announced he's going to annex 4 regions in Ukraine, was because NATO was enlarged. And that was a hallmark about what you did, and Secretary Albright wholeheartedly supported you on that. Can you talk about that a little bit and why it was important to do that?
Yeah, I actually ran on it in 1992. You know, I spent a lot of time, nobody paid much attention in 92 because it was more about domestic issues, but I said, if I win, I will have the first presidency that occurs entirely in the post-Cold War age, and we have to decide how we're going to shape it. And my theory about all this is that the world is totally interdependent, but that can be good, bad, or both. And therefore, I think our policy has to work for the best and be prepared for the worst. And then I'd say, well, I thought we should expand NATO, starting with Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, and then leaving the door open to others. And, you know, she was involved in that, and she wholeheartedly agreed with it. And I thought it was amazing when later some people said, well, this just shows you what a mistake it was because it hurt Russia's feelings. And I thought, well, would you rather, instead of Ukraine, that Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic were worried about Russian expansionism? Is that really, would that be a good thing that we should be? The Russians have a different view. And I spent 8 years working with Yeltsin to try to get him to define Russia's greatness, not in terms of 19th century imperialism or 18th century imperialism or the defensive power of controlling your neighbors, but in terms of creating a whole new future based on their unbelievable abilities in information technology, all sorts of IT stuff, as well as their evident wealth under the ground, not just oil and gas and other things. And I made some headway with him, but they had no institutions that were basically oriented toward that. And when he left office, he deliberately picked in Putin somebody who could work harder because his cardiovascular system would only function about 4 hours a day then. And it's you can laugh about this, but the average life expectancy of a Russian male dropped to 59 after the Cold War. And the healthcare system essentially collapsed. And Yeltsin served until he was in his late 60s and lived to be 76. So anyway, I understood that, but Putin thought the dissolution of the Soviet Union was a great tragedy in human history. Yeltsin thought it was a good thing because it would give freedom a chance to flourish in more places. And that proved to be an unbridgeable gap when the two administrations changed. And then when Putin decided to stay forever, a big door was closed. Because when you decide to stay forever, it changes everything. Then the most important thing is just destroying your opposition, keeping them weak, keeping them on the back foot. I can't explain it. Look at what China's done since President Xi decided to stay forever. He was a nationalist when he took office. And when President Obama had his first meeting with him, there was a lot of talk about it, and Hillary knows more about all of it than I do. But if you decide to stay forever, it changes everything. Almost always for the bad, for the worse.
And Hillary, as Secretary